Evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Glad I'm here. Yes, I had our wedding anniversary last weekend. A lovely time down at Kingscliff. Very nice kayaking down there. But before that week, you might remember if you were here that I talked about how MCC is changing. And we talked about how our congregation is getting bigger and more diverse. And, we know as a congregation we're already pretty diverse. MCC is known for being diverse in sexual orientation and gender identity. It's kind of our thing. But also in denominational traditions, we're quite diverse there as well. But in the past couple of years, we've become even more diverse. There's a lot more younger people attending now. We've got some straight people coming. We've got straight parents of queer teenagers and adult children. They're finding us. We've got more people who identify as non-binary. We've got a growing group of neurodiverse people. And 2 weeks ago, what I really wanted to do is just acknowledge that change is hard. And it's harder for some people than it is for others. And change is hard even when the change is positive, which I think we can affirm it has been. For many people, change feels like a loss before it feels like a gain. And people need space to grieve loss. And we heard from some of our more long-standing attendees some of the things that they thought shouldn't change. And I wanted to mention some of those. So things about past MCC that present and future MCC should really hold tight to. Things like inclusiveness, things like radical acceptance. Those are the things that kept on coming up again and again. Things like a lack of judgment of people's backgrounds, of people's sexualities, of people's gender identities. And I said that we need to hang on to those strengths as we grow and as we change and as we become more diverse. And I've been thinking in the last couple of weeks about what it is that binds this really diverse community together. And I think basically we're all just trying to follow Jesus as best we can. I think that that's a big part of it. We're trying in our imperfect way to love God and love our neighbour. We're trying to understand and practice God's grace towards one another. But that's not easy. Because let's face it, people are really difficult to be around, don't you think, for any length of time? Have you noticed this? One of my favourite, I call him my favourite theologian. Older people may know him, Adrian Plass, wrote a book called The Sacred Diary of Adrian Plass. He used to say, I could be a really good Christian if other people didn't keep messing it up. And I concur with that. We are a congregation full of flawed individuals with hang-ups and unresolved issues and annoying personality traits. And that's just the board. I'm just kidding. And maybe we've got this mistaken notion but churches are different, aren't they? Like, after all, churches are full of Christian people. And Christians are supposed to be, they're supposed to be nice, aren't they? The thing is that the church, right from the very start, had all of this internal conflict going on because it was full of imperfect people. So I think about the letter to the Galatian church. Paul gives Peter a serve about what he sees as Peter's hypocrisy. Peter, this Jewish Christian, he was happy to eat at the same table as the non-Jewish Christians until some important church leaders from Jerusalem showed up, and then he backed off because he wasn't sure how that would be perceived by these leaders. We never hear Peter's side of the story. I'd be very interested in that. I bet he had a side. I remember Paul and Barnabas. They had an argument over whether young Mark should be allowed to come with them on one of their Jesus tours. Paul said no, absolutely not, because Mark had let them down on a previous trip. Barnabas said, no, we should give Mark a second chance. Well, the disagreement got so heated that Paul and Barnabas went their separate ways, and they parted company for a while. There were two women leaders in the Philippian church, Euodia and Syntyche. They were clashing so much that Paul just begged them to stop arguing and sort out their issues when he wrote a letter to that church. There were all sorts of divisions happening in the Corinthian church. There was conflict over styles of worship. There was conflict over different beliefs about Jesus and the resurrection. There was conflict over different moral values and different sexual standards. You can read about that in Corinthians. So the first churches, right from the very beginning, they were just full of conflict. And they had to work through all sorts of things. And partly because they were a really diverse group of people. And being Christians, being followers of Jesus, didn't exempt them from conflict. We are naive to think that just because we're Christians, we don't have to deal with conflict. I've been around churches for about 40 years, and my observation is that congregations tend not to do conflict very well because we're nice, aren't we? We're Christians. Us Christians, we all love one another. We all value kindness and harmony and peace. And so when there's a disagreement, when there's a difference of opinion, when there's a miscommunication, or when somebody does something that somebody else thinks is wrong or upsetting, it often gets sort of papered over. We don't really want to talk about that. Nothing to see here. We're all just happy and worshipping the Lord, getting along wonderfully. And so things fester under the surface until eventually they blow up in ways that are really ugly, or else people just leave quietly, and sometimes both. MCC isn't exempt from conflict. There's been conflicts in the past, and we would be naive to think that there won't be conflict in the future. And with our congregation growing and becoming more and more diverse, I think that we can expect to see the occasional spark fly. I told you a couple of weeks ago that I don't like change. Well, I don't really like conflict either. I'm a bit scared of it, to be honest. I'd rather just keep my head down. So, when an email dropped into my inbox a couple of months ago from UFMCC, that's our kind of international body, offering a free course entitled Living Well with Differences, I signed up on the spot. And I managed to talk Scott into it as well. And so we both spent 3 hours, I think it was 3.5 hours, every Tuesday night. It was a time difference thing. It was people in the UK running this course. So, we didn't finish till 10 o'clock. We were committed. We did this for 4 weeks, and we learnt all sorts of things about reasons for why conflict happens, how it escalates, what you can do about it. It was a really good course, and I just valued it, and I thought, this is the stuff I need to know. And it changed the way that I think about conflict, because rather than seeing conflict as something that's always negative, I started to see through this course that, yeah, conflict can be terribly destructive, but there's a possibility that it can be transformative. It can actually result in a stronger, healthier congregation. And I think about that with friendships as well. You know, they say that it's not a true friendship unless you've had at least one big argument. That's when you start to see what the friendship is all about. And the difference between conflict being destructive and conflict being transformative is how you view conflict. It's understanding why it's happening, and it's finding ways of using conflict to strengthen relationships instead of damaging them. One of the things that I found helpful from their course, and I thought I would share it tonight, is their approach to what they call personal conflict styles. Now, if you work in some corporation or maybe government department, you're probably sitting there going, okay, here we go, this is HR department. But I found it really helpful. So personal conflict styles, this organisation, Living Well with Differences, said that everybody's conflict style sits somewhere along these two axes. I'm motivated to get what I want or what I think is the best solution to an issue. So that's one motivation, that's the up and down one. But I'm also motivated to maintain good relationships with other people who have a stake in this issue as well, whatever issue it is. And they, of course, have their own ideas of what the best solution is. And they also are motivated to a greater or lesser extent by the relationships and maintaining good relationships with me if we're in some kind of conflict. So that means that there's kind of 5 ways that this plays out. And of course, this is a spectrum. The first one is the my way, I win, you lose. I'm very motivated to get what I want or push my solution and ideas as the best way forward, and I don't really care so much about the relationship. Well, in that case, I would be pushing my way. We need to do it my way. I want to win, and I don't really care that much if you lose. Alternatively, I may be highly motivated to keep my relationship with you intact, and that's a lot more important to me than my solution winning out. And that leads to a your way, we'll do it your way solution. I lose and you win. Or maybe we can find ways of working together cooperatively to find a solution that both of us agree is the best way forward. And we do it in such a way that our relationship stays strong or maybe is even strengthened in the process. So we both win. Maybe I actually don't care too much about the solution, too much about the issue, and I'm not that concerned about the relationship either. So instead of engaging with you, I just avoid the issue. My withdrawal means the issue doesn't get solved. I lose, and so do you. Nobody wins. Or finally, I can decide, I'm willing to compromise, give a little, take a little, as long as you do too. So I win some, and you win some. Now, the Living Well with Differences course had, of course, some little animals associated with each one of those, cute animals, so that it helped us to remember these different styles. Some are more apt than others, maybe. I'm not sure why they thought koalas were accommodating. They obviously haven't met one. Because I hear them in the trees outside my house sometime, and they're not accommodating at all. But I guess this isn't rocket science, but I found it really helpful to see conflict and conflict styles along these kind of axes. Of course, once we'd gone through this, I just assumed that they were going to promote our way as the best way. Like, is that what you would think? Like, obviously, this is how we should be working. But what they said actually made more sense, and that is that no one style is the best style. Rather, different styles of approaching conflict suit different situations. They all have pros and cons. The wisdom lies in choosing which is the best style for which situation. So, that's a bit hard to see, isn't it? So the my way is kind of this direct confrontational style, and we use a shark for that. So that's a really good strategy when you're in an emergency, or when being right is more important than preserving the relationship, or if the issue is actually so trivial that nobody cares what happens and somebody just needs to make a decision. It's a style that might take courage, and it needs someone to be assertive. It's not a great style, though, if you want to build cooperation, when a diversity of ideas and opinions is really what's needed to solve the issue. It's not great if you just use it as your default style all the time. This is how you approach everything, because it's a style that risks hurting people's feelings, and it can come across as really tactless, and pushy. When there's a fire, you don't sit around and get input on what everybody thinks we should do. You just clear the building. That's a direct time when a direct style is worthwhile. If someone joins the congregation at MCC and it becomes clear that they're sexually harassing someone, then the leadership will tell them to stop. And if they don't stop, the leadership will tell them to leave. That's a time when a direct conflict style would be really useful. The Koala, accommodating style, a good strategy when you don't really care about the issue, you don't have much of a stake in it, you're actually powerless to do anything anyway, but you don't mind if the other person's solution wins. It's a style that promotes harmony. It can diffuse anger. It's not great when you end up feeling resentful because you're losing and they're winning all the time. It's not great if you're dealing with someone who's being a bit of a bully. It's not great if you're using it to gain acceptance. It's a style that can leave you open to being taken advantage of or being taken for granted. And if you use it all of the time, eventually it will impact your self-esteem. But if your friend wants pizza, and it's not your first choice, but, hey, whatever, pizza is fine, that's not a bad style. And if the worship style of a particular worship leader doesn't really float your boat, there'll be a different worship leader next week. That's okay. The next one, the owl, is our way. We both win. We both work together, cooperate together to come up with the solution. It's a good strategy when the issue and the relationship are both really important. It's a great style when what we need is a creative solution, when we've all got time and energy for discussion. It's a good style when it's reasonable to expect that we can come together to a solution. It's a great style because it builds trust and deeper relationships, and it can enable the bigger picture to be seen. I've pulled this stuff straight out of this course. It's not great, though, when time is short. When the issue is trivial. Do we really want to have 2 hours discussing some trivial matter? No, not really. It's hard when your brain is overloaded and you just don't have any more spoons. It's not great if you are utterly convinced that the other person's goal is harmful or unhelpful. And it's a style that needs both parties to be willing to work together. It doesn't work if one party is not willing to come to the table. So if there's a disagreement over how the funds of MCC should be used, everybody's voice is important and everybody needs to be heard. And when we're all committed to voicing our own concerns and our dreams, and we're all committed to listening to everybody else's concerns and dreams, well, you know, that process, it might take a while and it might be frustrating, but we're likely to come up with a great way forward that we're all invested in, that we're all committed to. Avoiding. Pull your head in and disappear. Nobody wins. It's a good strategy when there's a risk of harm to either party, when the issue's trivial and nobody really cares what happens. It's a style that's useful for minor conflicts that, you know, if you just ignored them, they'd just go away by themselves, because that does happen sometimes. It's not great, though, when you care about the issue and when you care about the relationship. It's not great when others would benefit from caring confrontation. It's not great if it's used as a default style, if this is the way you deal with conflict all the time. It is a style that can be used to avoid conflict when the conflict really needs to be sorted out. So if you're having a spirited debate with a friend and you realise that their voice and your voice is beginning to get louder and louder and you're starting to interrupt each other, it might be time to just take a step back and say, you know, let's come back to this another day. Or if you find yourself alone with someone and suddenly your gut says, you know, something is just not right here. I'm feeling a bit threatened. Well, get the hell out of there. Avoidance is a very good strategy. The final one, a halfway or a compromise. We both win something. That's a good strategy when cooperation's important, but we don't have a lot of time, maybe we don't have a lot of resources. It's a good strategy when finding some solution is better than finding no solution. It's not great when finding the most creative solution is what's really going to be helpful. And it's not great if you can't live with the consequences of compromise. So if you do the Bible reading for me next week, I can do the opening prayer for you the following week. That's a good compromise. MCC has so much going for it as a congregation. We heard from those long-standing members, those traits of our congregation that we need to hold on to. And you know, I hear those same traits from new people when they come, and I ask them their impressions of our congregation. Often those same words come up, that radical inclusiveness, that willingness to accept people for who they are and allow them to figure out how to walk with Jesus without imposing what that has to look like. I would love to see MCC add another strength, another string to its bow. And I wonder if we could learn to view conflict as something, not as something to be afraid of, but as something that presents opportunities for strengthening us as a congregation and finding creative solutions to potential problems that are bound to happen as we grow and become more diverse. I wonder if we could figure out together how to do conflict well. We'd be a standout church if we could figure that out. And I think that we'd probably muck it up at times. And I don't know, maybe the best way is to make mistakes and then evaluate what went wrong and how to do it better next time. I saw a wonderful example of conflict done really well 2 weeks ago. And I asked Jess Harrison if I could share this, and she said yes. 2 weeks ago, when I was talking about diversity in our congregation, I used the term differently abled. The next day, I got this message from Jess, who uses a wheelchair some of the time. She said, "I know you like learning as you go, so I'd like to let you know that we in the disabled community prefer disabled over differently abled, because disabled isn't a bad word. We're disabled and happy to say it. We don't need to fear or be ashamed of who we are." You know, Jess could have decided not to say anything and silently stew over my use of a term that was well-intentioned but maybe misguided. Or she could have written a harsh and critical note to me that just berated me for my stupidity and ignorance. Or she could have complained to her peers about the uninformed speaker at her church. But instead, she wrote to me directly. She communicated clearly what I'd said that negatively impacted her. She explained the reason why it wasn't a good term to use and what she would prefer that I used in the future when I was talking about her community. And I really appreciated her courage and her open communication, and I told her so. It was just a small little thing, like a really small conflict, but it was a conflict. And it got resolved quickly and easily, and our relationship is just a little bit stronger than it was before. And I learnt something that I didn't know, and I'm not going to forget that. It would be naive to think that all conflict can be sorted out so easily, but I reckon that it would be a great goal to aim for, and I think that we as a congregation should give it a go. What do you reckon? Yeah. Cool.